I am, whoops, recording in progress. Okay. Erev Tov, guten Abend.
Oh, Henny's muted. Henny, you're muted.
Oh, no.
Okay.
There we go. You're back.
All right. We'll do it again.
Good.
Erev Tov, guten Abend. Good evening. Bienvenue. I am very, very happy to see all of you and to thank Joelle, who will be running the show behind the scenes. Joelle Glazer is the engagement associate for the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so far, so good. This beautiful young lady that is going to be balancing us, hopefully, muting and unmuting. And I also have the pleasure of welcoming Marilyn. Oh my God. I met Marilyn because she's interested in Yiddish, and that is one of my languages. So today, Marilyn will be speaking to us about why it's important to have at least one more language and how useful it is in everyone's life, and certainly about how useful it has been in her life and her accomplishments because of being a linguist. So please join me in welcoming Marilyn to Western New England and the Federation of Massachusetts.
Thank you, Henny. And thank you, Joelle. I wish to thank everyone involved in making tonight's event happen. And I'm recognizing Henny and Joelle, but there were also other folks involved. Thank you for Women in Philanthropy of Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts, Hannah Yaffe and Nora Gorenstein, and Claudia Mehar Hafner. Actually, Claudia lives near me in one of the hill towns. And also from the community to which I am now a member, Beit Ahava. I want to recognize and thank Rabbi Ricky Kosovsky and the Beit Ahava community for their support and encouragement. So I'm going to reveal, through telling you my story tonight, why speaking a language, in the United States in particular, why speaking a language in addition to English is a gift. And it's something to feel proud of, and not something perceived by others that can be a deficit. So I'm going to start by telling you what I do for a living and what my field is all about. And then you'll hear a little bit about my childhood and we'll move on. So my field is called applied linguistics. And that means I had a lot of fun in graduate school. I got to study the human brain to an extent and learned how humans learn subsequent languages. Native language is different. Native language is acquired, but humans have to work hard to learn a second language. Anyone who accomplishes that deserves a recognition that it's a beautiful situation. Now, at the same time, it's important to recognize that we have many friends and neighbors and family members here in the United States who came here from other parts of the world, who spoke a language in the other regions of the world. So when they speak English, you hear the evidence that English is their second language. And people get all turned up into knots about accents. An accent is only facial and labial muscles that start to form when we're 9 months old and begin emitting the first sounds of our lives in our native language. I think it's 146 muscles to be exact. That's all it is. And to my ears, I love the sounds of accents. One of my favorite activities is to try to determine where a person is from by the way that person pronounces the sounds of English. So I grew up as a simultaneous bilingual speaker of Yiddish and English. And I had the honor and privilege of serving as one of my bubby means grandmother, one of my bubby's translators as a child. Was a profound experience. and it left an impression on me that is to this day informing my life and my work. I didn't like how my bubbies, who were wise women, one escaped from Europe, from the part that we know as Lithuania. She came from a village near Vilna. The other one escaped sooner, prior to that, from the pogroms in the Ukraine, from another shtetl that's called Novograd-Volynsk. These two strong women spoke to me in their native language differently because they were from different regions, and they sometimes made up words. So my Yiddish is very interesting. But those women, I didn't understand why people didn't have patience to want to listen to them when they were speaking English. I didn't understand the looks that people gave them who are non-Yiddish speakers. Now you have to understand, my neighborhood is what we call in applied linguistics, it's called a speech community, because there were between 70,000 and 90,000 Yiddish-speaking Jewish people who had either escaped from World War II or the Holocaust, or were the children of the escape, those who escaped. And everybody spoke Yiddish everywhere. On all the shops on Blue Hill Avenue, even the mailman, when there was Ben the mailman. Now we don't call people that. When I was a kid, when he would bring mail to the house, I'd be playing outside with my siblings, and he would say something to us like, "Ah, these kids, they're always fressen." It means they're always eating. So we were hungry. But that's what life was like for me. And I thought the whole world was just like me. So every day of my life, I say thank you to my bubbies. When I light the candles on Friday night to bless the Sabbath, I bring them into my life, and they're with me. We're connected through this invisible chain. So I'm standing on their shoulders as I speak to you tonight to tell you this story. So realizing that I was bilingual when I was 9 years old was an amazing thing for me. I had no idea up until then that I was bilingual. I was like, how did this happen? My bubby Bubby Molly, the one from Lithuania, she came across Morton Street. So one side of Morton Street was Dorchester, the opposite side was Mattapan. I don't know if you know these communities. It was the poorest part of Boston still today. She came across the street and she was shaking her finger at me like this. Can you see my finger? That is called a zug up. She was going to give me a lecture in front of all my friends. Oy vey, what was I going to do? So after she turned on her heel to leave, after she tore me up one side and down the other, my friends asked me, "Marilyn, did you understand what your grandmother just said?" All right, I'm going to tell you the truth. I crossed my fingers behind my back. I looked at my friends and I smiled, and I went with my shoulders. Interpret that body language any way you wish. Of course I understood her, but I wasn't going to tell my friends what she said. And then standing there at age 9, I thought, is everybody like me? Can everybody else do this? Listen to one person speaking a language and understand it, and then speak another language. This was normal, living in that community. So I'll tell you another story of Yiddish from that time in my life. This bubby, she was maybe 4 foot 10 inches tall at her tallest. I was 10 years old. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was running for president of the United States. He came to our neighborhood. He came to Blue Hill Avenue and stood on a podium in front of a restaurant called the G&G Delicatessen. All right, so delicatessen is also a Yiddish word. It's delicious. It's what you're going to eat, as soon as eat. He's standing there and he's talking to the men of the community, because that's what happened in those days. Women didn't get recognized then like men did. And my bubby, all 4 feet 10 inches of her, walked up to him and told him this: "Mr. President, du bist sehr verdacht. Du darfst essen etwas. Kommst zu meine Haus. Ich will geben dir etwas, a Stück Fleisch." And I said to her, "Bobby, verstehst du nicht?" And what did she say to me? "Schweig still." So I'll translate. She said to the president of the United States, who was then the candidate, "Mr. President, you're very skinny. You need to eat something. Come to my house. I'll give you a steak." And I said to her, "He doesn't understand you." And then she told me to be quiet. All right. So there's your evidence of what it was like for me as a child. So what was happening in our neighborhood at the same time? I don't know if you're familiar with the book called The Death of the American Jewish Community. North Dorchester and Mattapan were being redlined, and there was blockbusting happening. In Boston's example was the most egregious in the United States, but it wasn't the only example. It was also happening in parts of New York and the Midwest. But one day, during this tumultuous time when different houses were being sold intentionally in different neighborhoods, parts of our neighborhood, which we were essentially poor. Who knew any better? Everybody was poor. I was sitting in my 6th grade homeroom, and my teacher's name was Miss Cronin. I loved her. She was the epitome of feminism to me in my young mind. She always wore her hair pulled back in a bun. She was extremely strict. She always wore a 2-piece suit to teach her classes. She taught us English, that amazing language. So it was towards the end of the year, at the end of the academic year, and she was organizing us into different groups in class. Who was destined to go to the next school? So back in those days, it wasn't middle school. It was either junior high school and then high school. And because we were in Boston public schools, there were lots of choices. So she sat me down in our homeroom with a group of students that she said were destined to go to Latin school, Boston Latin school. Whoa, if you go to Boston Latin school, that's amazing because it's an exam school. You can't just go. So I waited, and now I knew because there were events happening in our neighborhood. People were trying to use scare tactics to get us to leave so they could sell more of the homes in the apartment buildings. So the bankers and the realtors could take advantage of the federal funding for second mortgages. All of this was going on. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to go to Latin school because there was talk in the family that we were going to move to the next town 3 miles away. We were going to move to Milton. So after class, I approached her desk and I said, Miss Cronin, you told me, you sat me down with the students who are destined to go to Latin school. Did you do that on purpose? Am I supposed to go to Latin school? And, strict Miss Cronin, she said, Marilyn Glazer, if I said you're going to Latin school, you should go to Latin school. You should know that by now. I'm like, okay. I loved that sentence. I held that sentence in my heart for many years. And then finally, when I was in my 40s and I got to finish my college education, I was going to Tufts University for my junior and senior year to major in my 3rd language, which is one of my favorite, most beautiful languages. It's Espanol. So I was sitting with my academic advisor at North Shore Community College, where I studied for my freshman and sophomore year. And I was asking her questions about what it's like to be a student at Tufts University. And she was trying to scare me. She had gone to Tufts, so she knew. She was trying to scare me into how serious things were going to be. And I couldn't help it, but I had this big smile on my face. And she said to me, Marilyn, what's wrong with you? Why are you smiling? This is supposed to be frightening. And I said, Marcy, I'm finally going to Latin school. This is exciting. And as a matter of fact, the language building on the Medford campus of Tufts University is on the street called Latin Way. So there you go. So I love Yiddish. It is in me forever because it's a native language along with English. And those of us who study applied linguistics learn the theory of innatism, and we learn how human beings biologically grow their native languages. But I also fell deeply in love with Spanish. And my love affair began when I was in 7th grade. So we did leave Mattapan and we moved to Milton. And that's when I met my friend Chester, who's here tonight in our audience. And I'm sitting in French class in Milton, the Milton Public Schools, the junior high school. And I was bored because the teacher was using a language teaching method called audiolingual, which comes from the experience of World War II of having to train so many diplomats and spies to know how to communicate with other people in different parts of the world as quickly as possible. The audiolingual method, if you don't know, involves a lot of repetition. And it's as if you don't know anything, you have to repeat not only spoken, but written, lists and lists and lists. So the teacher was explaining how to conjugate verbs, and I was so bored. So I was daydreaming. You know what I was daydreaming about? My favorite TV show? It was called Zorro, the fox. He was my hero, and he wore a beautiful, mysterious mask over his eyes, and he always helped everyone who needed help. It was a true, solid hero, and his name was Don Diego, and he said these amazing things in Spanish on the television show, like arriba and andale. I had no idea what I was talking about. I was a parrot. I was repeating what I heard on TV. So I asked to be excused from French class, and I went to bother my guidance counselor and told her what I was experiencing. And I said, listen, we're practicing conjugating verbs, and across the hall in la clase de español, they're having conversaciones. Can I please go there? Can I please go there? I don't want to be in French class anymore. And she said, Marilyn, what are you complaining about? You're getting A's in French. Go back to class. Stop bothering me. So, okay, I went back to class. I tried to learn the verb conjugations. It was a lost cause. The next week, I went to the guidance counselor again, and I asked the question, what do I have to do? What do I have to do so that I can go to Spanish class instead of French? French is beautiful. I love French today. No offense at all, but I was a 12-year-old and I was stubborn as a mule. So she said, you cannot get a grade any better than a C, and then I'll let you switch to French for next term. It was switch from French to Spanish for next term. So guess what I did? What does a 12-year-old do? I intentionally got a C minus. So I got to start taking Spanish class, and I became enamored with Spanish. So now fast forward, I graduated high school in 1969. Remember, from a poor background, poor meaning, no resources. So higher education was not an option I could choose. I went to work, I went about life. But when I became a mom a few years later, I made it a point to speak Yiddish and Spanish with my 3 children, of course, English most of the time. So they all know both languages as much as they can. So I have to tell you a funny story about my oldest son in his first day of public high school, and how Spanish at that point was making a difference in what I was going to do with the future of my life in terms of my career. So from kindergarten through 8th grade, my children's second language was Ivrit, was Hebrew, because I sent them to day school. Now, this was my oldest son's first day of public high school, so he got to go to Spanish class. And he came home from Spanish class, and you know, he's a musician. Musicians have very interesting brains, similar to bilingual speakers. The brains develop in such a way that they can imitate almost anything they want to imitate at certain levels. So he put his textbook down on the kitchen table, looked me in the eye, and he said, Madre mía, ¿quieres estudiar español conmigo? Yeah, of course I did. He asked me, do I want to study with him? Well, I had him laughing so hard about all the songs I was making up about the words and the opposites and the games I was playing with vocabulary. He said to me, you know what? You should do this for a living. You're good. From his mouth to God's ears. So I turned challenges into opportunities, because shortly after Jason's pronouncement that I should do this for a living, I became single head of household. And as a result, that challenge gave me the opportunity to pursue my college education. I became a student at my local community college in my mid-40s, and I'm proud of it. And that transformed me. And I made the decision that I want to pursue a career in community college, because I love the ability to touch people's lives and improve their learning. So after 2 years of the community college, I transferred into Tufts, as you heard. Here's what I did for relaxation at Tufts, because all my classes were so challenging. They were so hard. I took another language class for relaxation. So if you don't know, there are 15 different Jewish languages. I'm sure you hear the most popularly spoken ones are Yiddish and Hebrew, but there's also one that I learned to speak that comes from the Mediterranean. And around that time in my life, it was also a miracle for me to learn that my mother's ancestors came from the Mediterranean. They originally came from part of Italy and then moved into the Balkans. And the Balkans, it was a very circuitous route over a few hundred years into Russia and then to England and then to the United States. So I learned the language of the Jews of the Mediterranean at Tufts just for fun. All right, what does that say about me? I love languages, right? So that language is called Judeo-Espanol or Ladino. And it's not really Jewish Spanish. It has roots to Catalan. Of course, there's a lot of medieval Spanish in it. There's a lot of Hebrew in it, but there's also Arabic and Italian and Portuguese and French and some Greek words and even a few Turkish words mixed in. Oh, it's a gorgeous language. And I got to study it with the only university professor in the United States teaching the class who's a native speaker herself. So fast forward again. And I think I see in the audience one of my former graduate studies professors. I'm so honored to see you, Professor Casabon. You encouraged me to complete my capstone project, a paper I wrote in graduate school called Language Proficiency Testing or Assessment Tools and Practices. This paper was all about how my grandmother had been perceived by others. I love you. Because it talked about how people in the United States are perceived and treated when they speak English with an accent. It got published. I was so delighted to see that people were reading this. This is the emes. This is the truth. We need to value people who speak languages in addition to English and not treat it as if it's a deficit. It's a gift. So now I'm going to fast forward again. Okay, so it won't take too long to tell you more about this. I'm going to move into the career part of my life. So what does a linguist do? So I'm going to give you some examples of things I have done and continue to do, and how Yiddish and Spanish play a huge role in the work that I do. So I did teach at the college level for several years as a practitioner. I taught my recognizing two second languages alternatively in college classrooms, either Spanish or English. But I also had the opportunity to teach in corporate settings. I coped well with being sent out into the world and creating curriculum that was necessary to fit the needs of the learners. So I was so fortunate to have this opportunity. One example of a corporate setting where people were endangered because they couldn't read the safety data sheets on the factory floor. This was in a factory where people were coming into contact with dangerous chemicals for their work. I studied those safety data sheets and solved the problem by teaching the students in that class how to read the English they needed to read. And I had so many people in that class from so many different kinds of backgrounds. But here's where Yiddish played a role and Spanish played a role for that kind of work and changing people's lives. So before I could begin to even imagine writing the curriculum that was necessary to teach people the English they needed for the workplace in the factory, or teach their managers the Spanish they needed to do business in other parts of the world, I had to do intake interviews. I had to get a sense of what the problems were. And I had to evaluate where the students were with their ability to communicate in English. I remember at one place I was in a hotel, and I was going to be teaching English to a lot of people who work in maintenance and in housekeeping. There were some people in the room who spoke German, and they didn't speak a speck of English enough to be able to fill out the intake interview form for me or do the basic assessment so I could get a sense of what they do. So I found myself in a classroom with Spanish speakers and German speakers, and I was giving the German speakers instructions on how to fill out the form in Yiddish. And I was giving the Spanish speakers instructions on how to fill the form in Espanol. I went home that day feeling so elated that I had the ability to do this, but it was also exhausting. You have to appreciate when a person is trying to communicate in a second language, how physically and psychologically and intellectually exhausting it can be. So there were many, many examples of this kind of teaching that I did. And I wrote several courses too, because this was going to segue into from teaching to building programs in communities of poverty. So I was hired to take a course that it is used to train freshman students from low income minority group backgrounds who are first generation college students like me. I was a first generation college student because my parents didn't go to college. So this course, I decided to write it and rewrite it in several different ways so that it could be taught to students who speak English as a second language, or it could be taught to students in public high schools, or it could have been taught to students who wanted to come from their high schools with me to North Shore Community College, where I could teach them this course and train them to mentor younger students to be successful and get 3 college credits for taking the course. That was such a rich experience, but that opened my eyes to a situation in the city of Lynn that needed grave attention. So when people are pulled or uprooted from their native countries, whatever the reason is, like my family had to flee for their lives. They were uprooted. A lot of people are uprooted because they think that if they come to a different country, a different part of the world, they're going to improve their chances for a more sustainable life. Other people are chased because of wars and other forms of strife and world events. But the children of these people who are brought to a country where English is the language and they don't remember their roots from their native country are left feeling rootless and left feeling lost. They look for something to hold on to. That was happening in the city of Lynn. It does not just Lynn, it happens in lots of gateway cities, where Lynn had per capita the highest number of 10 to 14-year-old children who were joining street gangs. Some of them were nationally recognized street gangs that were famous, and some were homespun from the region. And the children were being taught skills like sell drugs and shoot a gun. So I worked with a team of educators in Lynn through North Shore Community College and other organizations to create an after-school program called Project Yes, Youth Empowerment Success, to teach these wonderful, beautiful adolescent children that there are other options in life. They can learn to go to school and be successful. They can pursue their dreams. They can have the careers that they want, and they can be safe. The evidence that the program was working was at the time that I was leaving North Shore to move to Boston. Before I came to work in Middlesex, I was working in Lawrence and commuting from Boston. I'll tell you about that too. I went into the entrance to the campus building in Lynn from the parking lot. Now, this is probably 5 years into Project Yes's life, maybe 6. This young man opened the door for me and greeted me by my last name. So I knew he must have been one of the people who had been in the program with us, because everybody else calls me Marilyn. So I looked up at him and I said, "Is that you? Is that you, Jose? You're all grown up. What are you doing here?" "I am an engineering student at North Shore Community College." So a program that changed people's lives, that gives them the language they need to teach them the culture of North America, to teach them the culture of higher education, to teach them that there are options in life that they can have. That was so meaningful. So from there, a couple years later, I found myself working in an amazing city, the city of Lawrence, Massachusetts. I don't know if you're familiar with it in this part of the state. It's in the Merrimack Valley, not too far from the campus of Middlesex Community College. Our city campus is in Lowell and our suburban campus is in Bedford. I fell in love with the city of Lawrence because it reminded me so much of growing up in Dorchester and Mattapan. Not because of the language, but because of the feeling, the look of the buildings, the feeling of the community. The language, a prevalent language of Lawrence is Spanish, primarily from the Dominican Republic and some folks from Puerto Rico. Now, at this point, my fluency in Spanish had improved because I was using it even to help people learn to speak English if Spanish was their native language. I wrote curriculum for women who ran daycare programs in their homes, and I was teaching them how to read storybooks to their the children they cared for. And the storybooks were either written in English or Spanish. So I had a lot of interaction. So I found myself in Lawrence with the responsibility of bringing back to life an English as a second language program inside of a 4-year school that had gone dormant. In order to do that, I had to go out into the community and make friends with everyone, right? Well, across the street from my office was the New Balance building, the factory building. The CEO of New Balance was my former student at North Shore Community College. I taught him Spanish. How lucky was that? So I called him up and left him a voicemail message. And I said, can I please come and spend time with your employees and tell them about my English as a second language program across the street? I promised to bring chocolate and I'll bring promotional materials and I'll sit and I'll share with them. Of course, I got permission to go visit. And I met a lot of beautiful people and I joined a lot of committees in the city of Lawrence and I repopulated that program. From that program, it's called Ladder to Language, I was recognized for my work and given an opportunity to participate in a leadership academy that only focused on the Merrimack Valley and the struggles that people had in the Merrimack Valley. It was then called the Sandbox Leadership Academy. It focused on the city of Lawrence and the city of Lowell. So the work I was doing in the leadership academy helped me be recognized by my colleagues at Middlesex Community College. And they spoke about me. And I'm very grateful because that opened the door for me to be able to join them and many other fine colleagues at Middlesex Community College, where I've been for almost the past 9 years. So now I'm going to tell you what else a linguist does. So at Middlesex Community College, and I'm going to share my screen a little bit in a minute with you so you can see things, not just hear me talk, but actually see it. So today at Middlesex Community College, I have 3 different jobs all rolled into one. You can call me the director of the World Language Institute because that's one of my jobs. And I'm very excited to tell you that we offer the following languages at our community college: Arabic, Chinese, Finnish, French, German, modern Greek and classical Greek, Hebrew, Hindi, Italian, Japanese, Khmer, Korean, Latin, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. Not too bad, huh? Not too shabby. Now, what makes us different is the way that we teach it. If anybody is in the room who knows the theories involved with people who learn second languages, you're going to recognize the person who's my hero. My hero is a social interactionist from the former Soviet Union. His name is Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky did research on the idea that you can put higher level learners in the same space with lower level learners. And there's this amazing thing that happens. It's called the zone of proximal development. And in that zone of proximal development, the higher level learners actually lift the lower level learners further along in their language learning. Now, we have proven that with the method we use at Middlesex, because in all of our world language classes, the professors don't teach one semester at a time, which is traditional. I see that our professor of Ivrit, of Hebrew, is here tonight, so I'm going to talk about her class. There are times that Professor Davis may have students from Hebrew 1, with students from Hebrew 2, with students from Hebrew 3, and students from Hebrew 4 all together at the same time. And she knows how to effectively teach them the language and move them forward in their dreams of becoming a speaker of this language. We can't say fluency with 4 semesters. It takes, does anybody know how long it takes to become fluent in another language? 5 to 7 years. But she does miracles. She creates miracles with these beautiful students. So Middlesex is the only school that does that. Now, what's my other 2 jobs? So here comes the story of the second job. In 2015, I had a meeting with my bosses, my dean of the Liberal Arts Division, wonderful human being, Matthew Olson, the assistant dean, who was then the assistant dean, she's gone on to be a dean at a different college, Ellen Nichols, and our provost, Phil Sisson. And I told them, I shared with them, I had done research and written a paper on the feasibility of launching a startup inside of Middlesex, an intensive English institute. So I'm going to show you in a moment what that is, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I did. Starting in 2016 to 2017, with research and reading and writing, I use the word built. I didn't use a hammer and nail. I built the curriculum, selected the text materials, hired and trained the faculty, recruited and placed the students. I know how to do these things because I had wonderful professors in graduate school who trained me. I wrote the assessment tools myself for placement and individually interview and assess each incoming student. To this day, I do this work. And then September 2017, I launched the Intensive English Institute of Middlesex Community College. And I promise you, I'm going to show you in a minute. The following fall, 2018, I applied for eligibility for the Intensive English Institute to apply for accreditation from this amazing, amazing organization. It's the Commission on English Language Program Accreditation. Well, that's my third job. I am now the primary contact for the Commission on English Language Program Accreditation for Middlesex's Community College's Intensive English Institute. Why? Because I am a linguist. And I see someone here from another leadership academy that I completed called New England Chair Academy. And in New England Chair Academy, I learned about my strengths. In fact, they assessed 34 strengths for every single person in the academy. My top strength, input. Okay, so I like to write reports. This is one of the things I have to do to work with the people who will hopefully grant us full accreditation. So that journey began in October 2018. I attended a 2-day workshop in Alexandria, Virginia, on how to write a self-study report for the Institute and the college. And it became a 120-page-ish self-study report. I submitted it on time, February 2020. What happened in March 2020, everybody? The world experienced a pandemic. COVID hit. So we were supposed to have our first site visit from the commission in May 2020. It couldn't happen. No one could be there in person, face-to-face. It wasn't safe. Middlesex took such good care of all faculty, staff, and students. We were all moved to remote settings so that we would be safe. So the commission had to think about how they were going to be able to do site visits. And I'm very happy to tell you that they incorporated the virtual site visit opportunity. And we actually had the first part of our virtual site visit with the Commission on English Language Program Accreditation in September 2020. So a few months later, not terrible, right? So then I had even more reports to write to respond to that. And we were granted 1-year initial accreditation. And then March 17th, the in-person site visit happened. And keep your fingers crossed for me, please. I'm waiting to hear. I hope that we receive an extension from the 1-year initial accreditation for another 4 years. Now I'm going to take you to the website, and then I want to tell you how Middlesex recognizes world languages through the lens of equity. So first, I'm going to share my screen with you, and if you can you will all be able to see this momentarily. This is, tell me when you, I don't know if you can see it yet when it's loading. I took you to my homepage. So you've been hearing about this institute, hearing. Now you can see it. This is the homepage of Middlesex Community College's Intensive English Institute. I'm not going to click on all the links because I've got to tell you about equity with world languages and leave time for questions and answers. But if you look on the left side of the screen under Intensive English Institute, anytime you feel like it, you can send me an email message, call me. This is my office number. I'm happy to talk to you. I will take you to my website with me. We'll talk on the phone. We'll use our computers together, and I'll show you the curriculum overview, which tells you again the story of my grandmothers and why I stand on their shoulders and why I chose my career. It also tells you the story of all the people in my life who came before this day, who helped me get to where I am today in my career. You could also look at aspects of the curriculum and the citations from the field of applied linguistics. I think it's terribly interesting. I don't know if you do, but you'll see lots and lots of information. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back to be with you. So in 2018, Governor Baker enacted a law for the state seal of biliteracy. This started as a grassroots movement in an organization I belong to that's called Massachusetts Teachers to Speakers of Other Languages, otherwise known as MATSL. We had created a petition, we were signing it, and we wanted to bring this forward. What it means is, starting in 2018, any public high school student in Massachusetts who speaks any world language, either through assessment or testing, can prove proficiency in English and the other world language and get this beautiful document called the State Seal of Biliteracy. Why is that significant? Let me tell you. Because when I put on my hat to be the director of the World Language Institute, and I'm talking to potential students who are biliterate, that means they can listen and understand, they can speak with fluency, they can read and comprehend what they read, they can write sentences and paragraphs. With that document, I'm the person who can give permission to transcript them as incoming students to Middlesex if they place into the category by the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages called Intermediate High. They earn 9 college credits on their transcript for those languages, either as language credits or humanities credits, depending on the language. If they place higher into Advanced Low, which is the State Seal of Biliteracy with distinction, they can earn 12 college credits for their knowledge of their native language. It doesn't matter what language it is. All world languages would be recognized, including Yiddish. So now, please feel free. Ask me questions, Joelle. I'm going to do my best to answer them.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much. So there is a question. Mary asks, Marilyn, what suggestions do you have for how we can make languages come alive for all children?
Wow, that's a great question. A lot of it has to begin at the beginning with culture change. We have to teach the immediate world around us. Why don't we start with Massachusetts, since we now have this wonderful law called the State Seal of Biliteracy that recognizes this gift of biliteracy instead of treating it as if it's a deficit. We've got to start with children as young as possible so that they can be recognized for the gift that they have and allowed to express themselves in that gift and not diminish it, not squelch it, and force them to forget that native language and only focus on learning English. So this is a big topic. Barry, I'd love to have many conversations with you about how to move this forward.
There's another question from Henny. Did Mr. Legatsky write a book about his method? If so, what is it called?
Henny, I will email you later and I'll give you my sources on Lev Vygotsky and his work. Google will be our friend and it will help us locate his articles that were published on his work. He actually started with his 3 children.
So that's all the questions we have in the chat, but if anyone has a question and would like to unmute themselves and ask Marilyn, feel free to do so.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I tell you my story a little bit? Okay. I started in middle school or junior high with Latin and then went on and they couldn't give me Spanish. So they gave me an exchange teacher who had just come and he was from Germany. So I took German and learned German, and learning German I became an excellent student and he asked for a babysitter. He was here with his wife and his child. I volunteered. And one day when he was taking me home, he pulled over and he apologized for the Holocaust. It was amazing because I'm Jewish, but I was not aware. We were not studying the Holocaust. I was born during the Holocaust and we were not studying and never had learned. So I got proficient in German. I went on to college, UMass Amherst, and took examinations for placement. And I did so well in German that I got, I don't know, it was 9, 12 extra credits, college credits. Anyways, that's one story. Let me tell you. And then I started in the summertime in Amherst, and then there was WAY, and in the summertime they brought in different programs. So WAY, World Assembly of Youth, and there were young people my age from all over the world, and I was exposed to so many different languages, and I was having a great time talking to this guy, this one from German, of course, and then Spanish, and then Italian, and then French, and then um, I was all over the place, so I pursued languages all over, all over. So that's just part of my story. Then there was visiting my grandchildren in New Jersey, in Clifton, New Jersey, and right across the street from my daughter, who was observant, there was a little one block street, and the kids were during Cholamoid Pesach, they were riding their bicycles. So I took a chair out and sat on the corner to watch them. And this gentleman came out of his house. I had my chair right there, and he started yelling at me to get off his corner. Get off, and he didn't like my sitting there, and he had an accent. So I said, "Oh, what language do you speak? You have an accent." And he said, "Polish." And I said to him, "Dzień dobry." That's the only Polish I knew. And that gentleman turned around and went back into his house and left us alone. So let me see now, how does it go? When you speak to someone in a language he understands, it goes to his head. When you speak to someone in his language, it goes to his heart. Who said that? I've forgotten the author of that. You don't know?
I don't know either, but it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Okay, so now I work in a prison, and I have several languages behind me. I pursue this and that. So I'm pretty valuable in the prison. And I have guys who sometimes when I speak to them, they say, "Oh yeah, I speak this, but my daughter doesn't know it." I said, you need to let her learn the language, their native tongue. And a lot of them come to me because I'm into several different languages, and I have materials for them to use. What else was I going to tell you about? I don't know. It's amazing. It's amazing, and I encourage people to learn languages because it's a full life. You get a bigger life, and that's why I'm listening to you tonight. When I heard bilingual, okay, there you go.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Your story is
Thank
very
you for
interesting.
sharing your story. Marilyn?
Yes.
I think the lady that was talking about children learning, I think the reference was actually children who speak English. How about introducing them second language? When should you start and how should you go
Okay,
about
thank
that?
you. Oh, I thought it was the other way around. Children who speak a language.
Yeah.
Now, so these children are English speakers.
Right.
The earlier in their lives, it's critical that they have the input to the other language. So there's a couple of times in their lives that are considered critical periods. For native language input, from birth to 5 years is critical. but also to be able to start to learn a second language, whatever that language is, so that you can have near native like production. You cannot delay that. The younger they are, the better. Once they get to puberty, that part of their critical period is coming to a close. They can still learn the language, don't get me wrong, but their production of the language won't be so native-like or near native-like.
Yeah.
So the younger, the better. It's so important.
So true. And is it okay for them to hear several languages at the same time? When they're
Well,
little?
my three wonderful children that I gave birth to grew up in a household with me, and they heard Yiddish, they heard Spanish, they went to school and learned Hebrew. So they're all three are musicians. I'm so lucky. I only give birth to musicians and artists, but they all are adept at communicating in other languages.
Right.
It didn't do anybody any harm.
No,
No,
it's true. I taught my children Hebrew, and they learned Yiddish, and in school they learned French and German, but I think that I learned English when I was already 13. So here I am so many years later, there's still an accent because I didn't learn it when I was little.
it's a beautiful
Makes a difference.
accent.
It makes a difference though.
So when I speak Spanish to native speakers,
Mhm.
because remember, I didn't start to have Spanish lessons until I was 12 years old.
Right.
They often will ask me if I'm from Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll say, no, soy de Massachusetts.
Well, Joelle?
Yep, I think those are all the questions we have. Does anybody have a last minute question before we end this wonderful event with Marilyn?
Well, I just wanted to thank Marilyn because I am further and further in awe of everything that she's done through her life. I was born in Milton. I was very much sheltered in my upbringing, only needing English.
Yeah.
And then meeting her in high school, we weren't really that close at all in high school, but since then, and everything that she's done with her life has me in utter awe of what a great woman she is.
Thank you, Chester. You're making me verklempt. Do you understand verklempt?
Negative.
My eyes are filling with tears, but they're happy tears.
Yes.
I
I'm
understand.
choked up.
I was lucky enough when I was in Germany to learn basic railway Germany language. So I could actually ride on the locomotive of a train in Germany. But unfortunately, I did not pursue it because, again, being a stupid American, I only need English, not.
There's nothing stupid about you, Chester House.
Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining us to hear this wonderful, talented lady tonight. And if you're celebrating Passover, have a decent Pesach. If you're celebrating Easter, I hope it's a sweet and delicious one for you as well. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Mwah. Love
Thank you.
you.
Much.
Sei gesund. Stay healthy.
Yeah.